The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 1656. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1656, number 3 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to energy, the second engrossment.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, the author of the bill. Members, please take your conversations off of the House floor. Representative Acom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House File 1656, which is also known as the State Competitiveness Fund, is established to ensure that Minnesota gets its fair share of the federal bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act funds. The Department of Commerce is currently tracking, pursuing, or implementing over $1.8 billion in energy-related federal funding opportunities, including $87 million that have already been awarded and nearly $1.5 billion that have been encouraged for full application. Many of these applications require a match. Many more will be stronger with that match. Some of the applications will be for projects like grid reliability and resilience, aid to rural and remote areas, smart grid investments, expanded access to renewable energy, improved energy codes, career skills training programs, long-duration energy storage, and much more. Entities from across the state have already started reaching out to the Department of Commerce asking for technical assistance on everything from federal reporting requirements to technology-specific questions needed to be answered in order to apply for funds. We have also heard from smaller and rural municipalities and tribal governments who have noted that excessive burden of applying for federal funds without staffing capacity or being able to navigate the federal requirements. This bill addresses all of these needs with matching funds for the grants themselves, with local capacity development grants for effective applications, and for technical assistance for a technical assistance team at the state level to coordinate, communicate, and support entities across Minnesota. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
ACA moves to amend House File number 1656, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A4.
Representative Acom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A4 is really a technical amendment that clarifies the funding cap, and so it doesn't apply to the Department of Commerce, so they can help with administering the funds to entities and communities around the state. I urge your support. Thank you.
Any discussion to the A4 amendment? The member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Chair, would Representative Acom yield for a question?
The author will yield. Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Acom, just kind of looking at that amendment, what is the expectation? So, you know, obviously there was a $15 million potential cap as far as how much they could receive. I understand the technicalities. What is the estimated that the department is going to need for technical help that $15 million is not going to cover it?
Representative Acom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the question, Representative Swedzinski. And so really this is to allow the Department of Commerce, who might be applying for a grant on behalf of many entities throughout the state. So in essence, it's kind of like pass-through money. And so it's really for that purpose.
Representative Swedzinski. Any further discussion on the A4 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Mecklen moves to amend House File number 1656, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A6.
The member from Sherburne, Representative Mecklen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, it used to be Benton and Sherburne. So yes, this is a new type of amendment. I don't know that I've ever seen one of these in my tenure here, but this is legislative findings. The point of this is the legislator finds that increasing the competitiveness of Minnesota is critically important to ensuring the state's economy is strong and growing. Increasing competitiveness can be accomplished by improving productivity, improving competition, improving investments. The legislature further finds, this is the important part, that overregulation and overtaxation reduce the competitiveness of Minnesota by discouraging new investments and new competition. Minnesota consistently ranks among the highest tax states in the nation, and the cost of doing business in Minnesota continues to rise. In order to ensure a strong, growing economy, Minnesota should address policies that create roadblocks to private sector. I said that wrong. That should address policies that create roadblocks to private sector growth and policies to undermine investment. Madam Speaker, that is my amendment.
There is an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Aiken moves to amend the Mecklen Amendment to House File Number 1656, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A10.
Representative Acom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Meckland. And so as I considered this amendment and read through it, and thank you for reading it to the body, this bill doesn't have anything to do with taxes or regulations, and so my amendment is taking out sections B and C of your amendment.
Discussion on the A10 amendment to the amendment. The member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Aiken, would you yield for a question, please?
She will yield to a question. Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Aiken, we understand, environment, right? That's a big reason why a lot of these things are going on, and why the majority is pushing a lot of the bills that we see before us today. One of the issues that we also have is economic environment. And, the legislative findings portion of Representative Mecklen's, when it comes to taxes and position and rankings of our state, really are important when we're trying to tell a story of what the state government's focus is. And I think, no matter what area we're talking about, whether we're talking about energy, whether we're talking about taxation, the focus of what our job as legislators to do. And, Representative Acom, I'm a farmer, right? And so, our goal really is, we're looking outside, we're opening up the windows. Imagine that farmer is just a business owner deciding what to do. And, the farmer is looking out the window, and obviously today is probably a poor day to plant some corn, but we're thinking about planting corn. And, when we have legislative findings and we put these things in the bills, it's saying, we care about that stuff as a state. We care about whether or not that field is ready to plant corn. Is that field ready to put fertilizer on? Is that field ready to be tilled in the spring? And by having legislative findings and stating, we care about these things. We want to make sure that this is a focus, that we're competitive, that we have energy that's affordable, safe, and reliable. We care about that stuff. And by gutting that, I understand why you may want to do that, but I think every single time that we can say it is a good thing. So that we're focused, just like that farmer is on that field. Is the field ready to go? Is it fertilized? Is it ready to grow that crop that we care so much about? And as we grow an economy, the energy environment, the energy field that we're planting these projects in, we want to make sure that all those things are culminated together so that we can stay focused where we're focused, where the state is focused on the issues of energy, of taxation, of regulation. I would ask that members vote no on the Acom amendment to the amendment. Thank you.
Discussion on the amendment to the amendment. The member from Itasca, Representative Igo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to speak to this amendment. Personally, when we look at deleting lines 8 through 13, I'm pretty disappointed to see that we're going to be removing that, because I think we've seen a lot of things in the last year about how overregulation and overtaxation has reduced the competitiveness of Minnesota. In fact, there was just a news article that came out here on March 21st someone might have saw in the news here that Kevin O'Leary just did a huge investment in the state of North Dakota. Mr. Wonderful, right? In the headline of this article, he made sure to say that he would never headquarter a business in the state of Minnesota due to taxation and overregulation. Right there is the sound alarm that we've been talking about on this side of the aisle for a long time, that we need to start changing things in the state of Minnesota if we want to attract good business. It was just a month ago that on this House floor, I was talking about the Huber project in Cohasset and how we lost a $500 million private investment into our state because of overtaxation and overregulation. If we want to be using dollars like we are in this bill today to couple more federal investment, we need to be doing other things to make sure that these investments stay and produce long-term jobs and prosperity for the citizens of Minnesota. We cannot continue to say bringing the money here is going to make a difference, because it won't. It takes more than that. It goes back to that equation that I always try to talk about. It's really easy to market to the people of Minnesota a solution. Everyone loves solutions, but solutions take hard work and they take more matters to get to that actual solution. If we want to use these dollars for good, it means actually instituting the things in Representative Mecklen's amendment. This amendment to the amendment totally guts this amendment and makes it not relevant to this issue at all and will not accomplish what we're trying to do here. We can come together as a body and actually make Minnesota a state that prospers, that helps people in all different forms of business, in all different forms of community. That is our commitment as elected legislators in this body. We are the House of Representatives. We are the closest to the people. We listen to those people every day, and the people that I listen to in my part of the state, in northeastern Minnesota and on the Iron Range, they are feeling the burdens now more than ever. So let's take a stance today saying that we're going to adapt this amendment. Let's remove this amendment to the amendment and actually start taking a stance to make this better, to make bills better so they work for everybody, to make these dollars work for everybody, to make this investment stay. Because when we have investment in our communities, it does more than just provide jobs. It sustains our communities with tax base. It provides opportunities for those across our state to whether they want to live in greater Minnesota or metro Minnesota. This is a very important discussion. And the things we're learning based on the track we're heading is that we are going to lose further investments, and we're going to continue to see the investments that we have here leave. We are not going to be able to sustain the state of Minnesota if we continue to lose investments that we have here. We cannot continue to lose investment and have to increase LGA formulas to keep our cities afloat. We will bankrupt this state. That is something very, very concerning. And when we talk about the budget targets and things that are getting proposed, we're actually going to be on track to be in a deficit in 2 years based on a lot of these bills that are moving through. We've already heard from companies from the Minnesota Chamber that they are considering leaving the state over a lot of these proposed bills. But we have been given an opportunity with this bill today that we're going to leverage more federal dollars. Let's take the stance today that we are going to put Minnesotans first, and we're going to start moving in the right direction to make this state prosper again. That is not only the goal of us as legislators in this room, but it was the goal of our founding fathers. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it is through those things we can deliver to them by making sure we give everyone the utmost respect for their prosperity. I would ask for a no vote on this amendment. Thank you.
The member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Representative Mecklin, when I saw your amendment, I thought this was really great because I think lines 1.8 through 1.11 really are a very sound finding. Members, last 2 weeks up here, I've had a number of people from my district in my office. I've had business owners. I've had people from various cities. I've had some farmers. It was Farm Bureau Day up here not long ago. And almost to a person, what they told me was, Jim, the amount of regulation that is being layered upon us again and again and again and again, not just in what they're currently undergoing, but in the bills of yours that they are reading, they are telling me that this causes them grave concern. The amount of overregulation for one of the passions that I have in housing is getting fairly profound. And I wish the chair was listening because we could talk about that, but he's not. The overtaxation piece is also quite concerning. So I have a number of very savvy people in Carver County that are watching the bills that are moving, and one of them called me, and I can't share probably 70% of the actual words that they used because I would get gavelled down for using them. But the message was, Jim, what is with this fifth-tier tax that's heading our way? And then the budget targets that were released the other day, that this person is a financial person, and they're realizing that not only are you spending every last nickel of the proposed budget, but that you're also spending money that way out into the tails. And they're saying, Jim, that money has to come from somewhere. That's going to come from taxes. So Representative Mecklen's amendment it's right on point. And I think you would find that the people of Carver County would back that up. They find that the overregulation is making it a very adverse business climate for them. Farmers are finding it to be a very adverse farming environment for them. And as you, I hope, know, farmers are just small business owners. You talk to a farmer, and they are at heart a small family-run business. I had one in my office today, and he's losing money hand over fist, and he's just hoping that something like this can become reality because he feels quite strongly that overregulation and overtaxation is going to drive his business into the ground. So, members, I think that the Mecklin Amendment is really well crafted, and that the amendment to the amendment from Representative Acom almost trivializes the impact of overregulation and taxation. It just says, we are not interested in having.
Representative Nash, if you move that piece of paper, your microphone will work again. There you go, Representative Nash.
Thank you. Okay, when you try to have a dramatic pause or a dramatic effect, sometimes you miss out on the microphone staying live. Members, I'm not going to get vitriolic. I'm not going to do anything. This is a good amendment that people around the state are actually looking at and reading, and they say, you know what, Representative Mecklin, this makes sense. That overtaxation and overregulation does have an impact on business. You know, and I do enjoy the Shark Tank. I find it fascinating, Representative Igo. And Mr. Wonderful apparently thinks that Minnesota is not so wonderful and that he would not invest his money here. I have spoken to many existing business owners in both my side of Carver County and Representative Ream's side of Carver County, and they are making business decisions for family-owned businesses that they may just leave. That they are businesses that don't necessarily have to operate here in Minnesota based on the geography and based on what they sell. They recognize that our surrounding communities are more business-friendly than we are. And we routinely get ranked as one of the least business-friendly states in the union. And I think that Representative Mecklin's finding here is very well crafted. Thank you, Representative Mecklin. And again, you're effectively trivializing. It's like a piece of fluff on your jacket that you just brush off like, we don't want to talk about that. So we're not going to. We'll just amend it out. We'll remove it from the amendment, and we hope that people aren't watching. So, members, I would encourage you to vote no on the Acom amendment to the Mecklin amendment. Recognize the impact of overtaxation and overregulation. It is a stifling effect. And that if you were to go to a local watering hole and you were to ask folks if you just read the Mecklin amendment and help them understand the practical upshot of what he's trying to get at, they would say, he's right. He's right. Vote no on the amendment to the amendment, and then let's move on to pass the Mecklin amendment.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I was confused listening to the author of the amendment to the amendment. I thought I heard that portions of this amendment weren't relevant to the bill, but looking at the calendar of the day write-up, that this bill is described as establishing grant programs to enhance the competitiveness of Minnesota. Competitiveness is on line 1.9 that's being deleted. And that's very relative if we trust, and I do trust the staff that generates the calendar of the day and the the verbiage that designates what the bills are doing. So by that, it's definitely directly related to the actual bill. And we're talking about projects and new technology development and et cetera. I've been to Argonne National Laboratories. I've been to Lawrence Livermore. I've met and spoken with and correspond with people that are developing new technologies. And frankly, there are a lot of things they look at, but one of the things they're restrained by is investment. And the tech people understand that they have to be with somebody that understands business to make a project work. And frankly, a lot of the business people don't think Minnesota is competitive for developing new products and expansion. In fact, local companies here have, because of delays, have had to build in neighboring states because of the regulations and taxes and et cetera. So on the 2 points that this amendment to the amendment are getting rid of something that is directly relational because staff and the documentation say the same thing, competitiveness. And if you do your research, there are issues we have with competitiveness in the state, and frankly, I think that's what the amendment, the underlying amendment, is trying to do. But then I'm just driven by logic, reason, and science, and I might not be understanding something and might have missed something. But from what I see, the amendment to the amendment doesn't belong with the underlying amendment, and I put it where it belongs. Thank you.
The member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I actually think that we have a little bit to build on here. If I heard the author of this amendment to the amendment in her words, and the fact that she didn't completely delete all with this amendment to the amendment, I think we have something to build upon, because in Section A, it talks about competitiveness and all of the different aspects to life that go into that. And so I really think that there might be some building blocks for bipartisanship here tonight, and I hope that we can continue to build upon this conversation this evening. And let's make Minnesota more competitive, because I don't like hearing from a Representative Igo or Representative Nash, stating what Mr. Wonderful has said just very recently about competitiveness in Minnesota, because I think that we share, on a bipartisan basis in this chamber, we share the need to make Minnesota more competitive. And I think, especially given the conversations that I've had with the author of this amendment to the amendment, that she has that same desire, the desire for us to create a business climate in Minnesota where this investment from the federal level, supported by the dollars spent at the state level, will result in clean energy policy. That's the context of the conversation that I've had with Representative Acom. And so we want to ensure that we have a business climate and a climate in general that enhances competitiveness. But let's just for a moment indulge in Mr. Wonderful's comments towards Minnesota. He said he'd never headquarter a business in Minnesota, and he says in Minnesota that Moorhead looks like Cuba. I would hasten to find out what he would think of Minneapolis or St. Paul. Yikes. Big yikes. So members, I just let's get back to the basics of this amendment that that Representative Meckland has brought, and just say that we need a little bit more. We need this language in sections B and C of this underlying amendment to help bring about the kind of culture that supports business, that supports investment in our state, that will help us bring about this change that so many in this chamber would like to see as it relates to clean energy. That's ultimately what this underlying amendment is about. Representative Meckland and I have represented the same communities before, the same counties, and frankly, we hear it all the time. We want Minnesota to be great for business, right? We certainly should want Minnesota to be great for clean energy businesses. That is ultimately what the underlying amendment does. So members, join us. Join us in opposing the amendment to the amendment so that we can get to a place where the full portion of this amendment can be adopted and added to this bill to make Minnesota more competitive and a great place to do business. Thank you.
Further discussion, the member from Sherburne, Representative Meckland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wasn't sure if there was anybody else. To Chair Acom, in your comment in the beginning about nothing in your bill talks about taxes or regulation. Again, on the calendar of the day, it does flat out say getting federal money, obtaining federal money, which I hate to think I have to point out federal money, it comes from taxes. I also am kind of surprised that we wouldn't all stand behind the idea of generally trying to minimize regulation and overtaxation, at least tell it to our constituents, because I certainly do all the time. So with that, Madam Speaker, I'd like to request a roll call. Thank you.
Representative Meckland requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. We are debating the Acom amendment to the Meckland amendment. Any further discussion? The clerk will take the roll on the Acom amendment to the Meckland amendment. Will the clerk please call the names of the members who have not yet voted?
O'Neill.
O'Neill, no.
O'Neill, no. Pryor.
Go ahead.
Pryor, aye.
Pryor, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 ayes and 62 nays, the motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. We are now back on the Meckland amendment as amended. The member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. You know, we had a great opportunity there to reject the Acom Amendment to really send a strong message to those states around us that we actually recognize the issues that it's kind of the old emperor has no clothes, where, the state of Minnesota needs to start recognizing that maybe it's not the place where people want to grow their business. Whether it's taxes, whether any other issue, we're seeing that time and time again here as session seems to progress. We had a good opportunity. And while I wish all of the language of Representative Meckland's amendment was adopted, it would be my hope that as the amendment was gutted essentially from most of the good stuff, there is a hair bit of okay left in the Meckland amendment. I would ask members to support that amendment. I think we really need to look at ourselves in the mirror really close. We're kind of in that time of session just before the Easter break, kind of just before deadlines, and getting back to our districts and really get to dig into, what's on the hearts and minds of the people that we represent. And we've got a job to do, folks. As that farmer, as that analogy that I used a little earlier tonight, are we going to leave fertile fields for our state and for our business? Or are we going to rob those fertile fields for our own gain today? And I was surprised. I was really hoping that we would pull that vote off and be able to have a full-fledged amendment by Representative Mecklen. We appreciate that you're carrying it. I would recommend a green vote and support the Mecklen amendment as amended, although we could have done a lot better. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Acom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would recommend a yes vote.
Discussion on the Mecklen amendment. The member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You
Thank
have
Represent-
5 counties, so the font is very small, but there we go. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I welcome you to recognize the other 4 counties in my district as well. Representative Acom, thank you for your offer of support of the Mecklen amendment. We are building upon some great bipartisanship tonight, and I like this. These are excellent building blocks. Excellent building blocks, because when you look at this section A of this Mecklen amendment, when we're talking about improving productivity, improving competition, and improving investments in our state, my oh my, what we will accomplish together. Members, this is exciting. We are going to get our state rolling again, and we're going to create an environment where we can actually see some strong private investment, bring good jobs to Minnesota. This is fantastic. What a great thing to hear that there is so much support for this. So thank you, Representative Mecklen, for bringing this to us tonight. We're excited to improve our state with this amendment. So thank you for your support, members. Vote yes.
Representative Mecklen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah, he did get the short end of the stick. He got 5 counties. I ended up going from 4 to 1. While I'm glad that we still have part of it, Chair Acom, I'm very disappointed that we had to lose the other 2/3 of it. As somebody who represents the Sherco Power Plant and the devastation of overregulations and what that's going to do to an entire community, he's not there now. What is it, Applewood, whatever? And what's happened to that community is going to be the same thing that's going to happen to several of ours. I believe Igo has one in his district, and when these times change. And I think it's an important message to tell people that we do take into account overregulation and overtaxation, especially when you consider the last year, how much have we all heard about a surplus and how people want it back. I think that's probably one of the biggest overtaxation messages that I've heard as of late. Leaving the part that is left in here, I guess it's better than nothing, but it certainly doesn't put that strong punch in the teeth in there that we had. And it's been a pleasure working with Chair Acom and the Energy Committee. She's been very fair. I really was hoping she'd go the other way on this, but as I talk to the constituents in Sherburne County, my one and only county now, sorry, Isaac, they have the same kind of concerns that of all these regulations and all these new taxes, and they see the new spending budgets and the biennium budget going up, and where's all this money going to come from going forward? They know in the Sherburne County, the taxes are going to go up because so much of the tax revenue comes from that power plant. For those that don't know, it's 75% of the city's budget, 25% of the school's budget, and 15% of the overall county's budget, all of Sherburne County. We had people the year before, that were already moving. Markets were up. They saw their taxes going. Obviously, their school's going to have major financial challenges, and they felt it was the time to go. Sadly, like many others, they moved out of the state entirely, largely in South Dakota, where they're still close to family. So Again, I wish we could have kept the whole thing and given Minnesotans a positive message on that we are monitoring their wallets for the better, and hopefully we will do better in the future. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I apologize, Representative Mecklen, for speaking. I thought I was on the list, but it was overlooked, which is fine. But I wanted to say, certainly, I'll be voting yes on this amendment. But I'm really disappointed that we added on the amendment to the amendment. You know, it's interesting. The section that we removed talked about overregulation, overtaxation, and it was actually Governor Walz just a few years ago who talked about how tax policy influences behavior. Tax policy influences behavior, and that's really what this addressed. And it's unfortunate that we removed this section, particularly talking about, you know, ensuring a strong and growing economy, and just frankly the reality that Minnesota should address policies that create roadblocks to private sector growth and policies that undermine investment. Well, that's what overregulation and overtaxation do. That's what they do. And like I said, don't take my word for it. That was Governor Walz. He said that just a few years ago, very specifically, that tax policy influences behavior. That affects what happens around us. So while Representative Mecklen, I'm certainly voting for your amendment tonight, I'm disappointed that it was kind of gutted. It's not the same amendment. But thank you for bringing it forward.
Any further discussion on the A6 amendment as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Swazinski moves to amend House File Number 1656. The second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A5.
The member from Lyon, Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, members. The A5 amendment is an exceptionally straightforward amendment in the idea that, you know, as legislators, if we do put monies into account, that if those monies are potentially not spent or matched by the federal government, we would essentially rake those back into the general fund. It's a pretty straightforward amendment. I mean, the idea around this amendment is that, you know, there's a lot of conversations going out in Washington, D.C. right now, and, you know, whether you're going to raise the debt limit, because, you know, a vast majority of these dollars were not tax dollars that were brought in to the federal government. They're tax dollars that hopefully Representative Davis's son Seth will be paying at some time in the future through printing. And if through those conversations, if the debt limit doesn't get raised again, and the federal government has to be looking for dollars to kind of pull back into the system so that we don't have to print more money or raise the debt ceiling, that Minnesota won't be left high and dry, essentially. So if those dollars aren't available, they're not coming in as they were stated to, that the state of Minnesota, we would just pull those dollars back so that we could better deploy them in other places rather than sit in some account someplace. And that's essentially what the amendment does. It's maybe going to happen, it may not, but just in case, I wanted to make sure that those dollars don't just sit in an account out into the future, and we have to wait for another legislature to pull those back into the general fund. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Acom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Swazinski, for this amendment. I'm going to recommend a yes vote, and while I don't think it's likely to happen, and I think there's been a lot of interest, and so the money that's in this account I think will go quickly, but it isn't going to hurt to have that, that safeguard there, and so I will vote, recommend a yes vote.
Any further discussion on the A5 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Swazinski moves to amend House File Number 1656, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A7.
The member from Lyon, Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. I think, what we're really doing is hitting really a great stride tonight. Representative Acom, members, the acceptance of the slightly modified Mecklen Amendment, the acceptance of the A5 Amendment, which would potentially pull dollars back in if they're not expended quickly. But the A7 is a little bit different. We hear a lot about the need for utilities and the amount of money going to be spent through utilities, but oftentimes it's that spending being done outside of the utilities and outside of some of the general energy markets. And really, this amendment really focuses in on, I can walk you through the amendment directly, but if you look at line page 2, line 27, we simply, before the first A, insert the or and delete or a nonprofit organization, and then we just slip it down into the next line underneath that. And the reason why we want to do that is to make sure that when we think about energy, we think about the utilities that actually generate it and transport it into our homes and into our businesses. And we want to make sure that those organizations are a little bit higher, and what the amendment does is just simply moves nonprofit organizations just down the hierarchy list a little bit, just a little bit, so that they're not guaranteed potentially in all the things they want to do 100% match. And I think that's a good way to focus our dollars, to be focusing on the places that are probably in most need, so that obviously there's potential that dollars may not be spent or dollars that will be spent, but to focus the dollars where they need to be spent so that they do the greatest good for the greatest, not just focusing them on nonprofits or whatever and keeping them into a little bit narrower of a lane. And I would ask for a roll call.
Representative Swazinski requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. The member from Hennepin, Representative Acom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Swazinski, for the amendment. And this one I have a little bit more trouble with, and the language talks about the possible grant awards and a maximum amount, but it doesn't say the minimum amount. And there's going to be a process through the Department of Commerce for evaluating applications. And as I listed in my opening, there's a whole range of entities well beyond nonprofits that will be applying for these grants and these matching funds. And so because it is not guaranteed that any priority group will get any amount of money and there's a range within them, I'm going to recommend a no vote.
Any further discussion to the amendment? Thank you. The member from Dakota, Representative Hudella.
Madam Speaker, members, so I'm about 3 months into this political circus stuff here, so I'm pretty new. But in that time, through committees, I found a plethora of nonprofits that we appropriate money to that are not doing good business. They're not following federal tax law. They're not reporting properly, and even a few that have direct connections to legislators or senators that are involved with those organizations or on their boards. So in the wake of feeding our future, I have a lot of concerns, and I'd like to ask the bill author if she would yield for a question.
She will yield. Representative Hudella.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Representative Acom, so are you telling me tonight, yes or no, that yourself and the majority puts their stamp of approval and are okay with any nonprofits that are receiving appropriations potentially out of this bill when we have some issues and we do not have a clear vetting right now in this state for nonprofits that are receiving state funds?
Representative Acom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative, for the question. What I'm talking about tonight and what we're focusing on tonight in this debate is this bill. And so in this bill, there is a list of priorities for applying for matching funds to try and get federal funds back to Minnesota. And so in that, there will be a process through the Department of Commerce for them to thoroughly evaluate all applicants, including nonprofits.
Representative Hudella.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't think I got a yes or no out of that. I still have a lot of concerns. We have a serious issue in the state with appropriations going to nonprofits that aren't doing good business. And I think both sides of the aisle want to fix that. Just concerns moving forward, and we'll hear about it later in the session, but I don't feel good about it. I support the amendment and would encourage members to vote yes on the amendment. I think we've got a lot of work to do with nonprofits in our state. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the A7 amendment. Will the clerk please call the names of the members who've not yet voted?
O'Neill.
O'Neill, aye.
O'Neill votes aye. Pryor.
Pryor, no.
Pryor votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 62 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 1656, as amended.
Third reading as amended. Discussion to the bill. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is a concerning bill in my eyes. I'm one who has a lot of concern when I hear about the federal government spending money that they don't have and then sending it to Minnesota and expecting that we're going to make this investment and then also thinking that we as a body need to go about spending $115 million to bring about this end, to bring about the federal level's Green New Deal. That is not within my value set, and Representative Kraft knows that. But really, we should be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, and that means fiscal responsibility and working together to bring about the kind of infrastructure that we need to provide for reliable, affordable, and safe energy. And whether that was money that came from the federal level, and then this bill with the purpose of joining up with it to bring about that investment in our state. The truth of the matter is, these sources of energy that will be brought about through a bill just like this, they don't meet those three standards. They're unreliable, they're dangerous, and unaffordable. And spending more of our taxpayer dollars to do this is not something that this body should perpetuate. And so that's my concern. We have, fortunately, I had the chance to speak with Chair Hornstein earlier this evening. We've done this for things like roads and bridges already, and we did this on a great bipartisan basis, and man, it flew through this chamber. It might have been on, it could have just as well been on Representative Long's, concurrence. It was so popular, so thank you for the work that has already been done on this. But Minnesotans at home should know that we should not be chasing an energy policy in Minnesota, whether it was through House File 7 or through this one, where we are going about spending $115 million to bring about unreliable, unaffordable, and dangerous energy. We've seen one of the harshest winters in a long, long time. And the energy sources that will be brought about through a bill like this are too particular energy sources that really don't bring about the kind of reliability that we need in our state. And I've got to give compliments to the bill's author. I read through this quite well, and you did well to write in the way that you wrote this bill, and it does make sense. So credit where due. But members, we certainly should not be spending this kind of money on this sort of priority. Just this week, the governor, the speaker, the Senate majority leader signed off on joint budget targets. And I'm not, hopefully the public who are watching at home, and from what I'm told, we have more participation online tonight than we've had at any other time during the session, and which makes this a perfect time to talk about the kind of priorities that we should have in this state. We've heard tonight about the things that we should be prioritizing. Making life more
Representative Schultz, if you can just hang on a minute. Members, it's getting rather loud in here and difficult to listen to the debate. So if you would like to have a conversation, please take your conversation into the retiring room. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, once again, this is about the priorities that we should have as a state. We can be prioritizing affordability overall in our state. We can be prioritizing ensuring that the people in our state who have a low income, that they have a path to get into a job. That is where our priority should be, to get more people into the workforce, to lower inflation. We should be going after the massive crime crisis in our state so people can be safe in their homes, in their communities, in their schools. These are the priorities that we should be putting forward this legislative session. Far too often we're hearing stories of carjackings, of shootings in the Twin Cities. $115 million could go a long way to enhancing public safety and the pipelines for more people to enter law enforcement. That's what we could be doing with $115 million. But instead, we have a bill tonight before us that brings about radical energy policy in Minnesota that is unreliable, unaffordable, and dangerous, members. And further, these investments that will be made in our state disproportionately impact rural communities. And I hope that we've thought about this in the last 2 months since House File 7 passed off this floor. And for the members across the aisle who represent rural communities, as hopefully you've taken note and listened to a few of your constituents, because as you know, that bill passed so fast in this chamber that nobody in Minnesota had the chance to even know what was inside that bill. So now, 6-7 weeks later, constituents back home have had a little bit better chance to hear what's going on this legislative session and to hear that within that bill, 31,000 new wind turbines will be installed in the state of Minnesota in the next 17 years. And Representative Akam's bill just wants to increase that, or for us to spend more of our state taxpayer dollars to make that investment. 31,000 wind turbines, members. 1,000 wind turbines in my district alone. How is that advancing green space? You know, had I been a little bit more creative, I potentially should have offered an amendment tonight that said that those needed to be placed in every single Minneapolis park. Because truly, members, with a bill like this, you are going to be placing 31,000 wind turbines across this state in 87 counties across this state, 350 wind turbines per county. Do you want to leave this chamber and see 25 wind turbines as you look in one direction? and we don't want to be Iowa. We need to protect the green space across this state, and this bill is going to be putting us in a position that threatens green space in every corner of this state. That's one of many reasons I'll be voting against this bill tonight. Members, I want to paint a little bit of a picture for you as to the issues that Minnesotans actually care about. Just yesterday, I received a notification that there is a senior living on a fixed income in northern Minnesota, not in my district, but in one of yours. And that constituent is a grandmother living on her own. And her monthly energy cost this winter is over $700. This sort of unaffordable energy policy that you are pursuing is wrong for the people of Minnesota, especially those on a fixed income, especially our most low-income Minnesotans. And frankly, I'm scared. I'm scared for the people of Minnesota, for low-income Minnesotans who don't have the ability to go buy a generator, because policies like this will advance solar panels and wind turbines that are unreliable, that result in rolling blackouts, that result in Minnesotans being without heat in a climate that can't be found anywhere else in the continental United States. We should not be pursuing a policy like this, and we should not be perpetuating the mistakes that have been made on the federal level. We should not be chasing the policies of the radical extremists in our country. Instead, our vision should be focused upon reliable and affordable energy, solid baseload energy for our state that is safe. This bill does none of that. None of that. And so, tonight, members, I encourage this body to think carefully over the fiscal responsibility that we should bring to our state in voting against this bill, because we don't need to chase a radical energy policy that hurts those most in need across this state, from Minneapolis and St. Paul to the heartbeat of the Iron Range to the rural landscapes of southwest Minnesota. Instead, we can be prioritizing reliable and affordable energy that keeps people safe. Let's make that the priority. Let's vote no on this bill, and let's get to work on the priorities of affordability so that Minnesotans can prosper in a time of record inflation that impacts each and every family. There's been conversation tonight about the cost of food. I'm not sure how many of you went out to dinner tonight during our break. But if you haven't heard, getting a Big Mac and a McChicken costs $15 in Minnesota today because of the wrong spending priorities, because of inflation, because of workforce challenges that this body is failing to get to work on, the biggest issues facing us. And instead, we chase radical policy that impacts each and every one of us, and especially the poorest in our community. Members, I encourage you to vote no, to be fiscally responsible with our state's dollars. And let's get back to the drawing board of the true priorities of the people of Minnesota. Thank you.
The member from Washington, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are halfway through the session, I believe, and hopefully. We have yet to pass a bill off this floor that deals with the #1 crisis in Minnesota, and that's our children's education. And the fact that here in Minnesota, less than half the kids are proficient in math. Reading, it's about 50% proficient in reading. That is the #1 issue that's facing this state, both in the short term and the long term. Because if we don't fix that and fix it soon, we're going to suffer the consequences forever. $115 million is a significant amount of money. It's enough money, as we know in the education committees, that we could provide tutors for all the kids across the state. We could provide extracurricular after-school programs that are specifically dealing with reading and math scores. We could provide more help in the classroom to try to get our kids back to where they should be. Instead, we're debating a bill to spend $115 million, $15 million of which is for administrative costs. $15 million. That $100 million is to do things in Minnesota that we all know are only a tiny part of our energy system. We had, I think it was NPR, had a story earlier this week that said that we just broke a record in Minnesota. We had 5 continuous months of over 10 inches of snow each month here in the Twin Cities. And they said that was an all-time record. This is a cold, cold state. We cannot afford to have Minnesota turn into a state with blackouts. This bill is spending money that frankly could go to better, much better purposes, things that are immediate. It's going instead, or being proposed, to go to things that provide a tiny section of our possible energy needs. Tiny. And if we continue to push and spend all of our taxpayer dollars on windmills and solar panels in a state where the wind doesn't always blow and the snow certainly covers these panels half of the year now, or more than half of the year. This does not work for Minnesota. So I would urge my colleagues to consider this bill and vote no on this bill. Thank you.
The member from Traverse, Representative Backer. The member from, I can't see because of Representative Dotseth. Cass? Itasca, Representative Igo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Speaking to this bill today, at the end we're coming down to what we're doing today is going to be leveraging federal dollars. I do want to say I was really hoping we were going to take Representative Mecklen's amendment as it stood tonight because I thought that'd be a great chance for every member of this chamber to say to Minnesotans, we hear the concerns that you have about overregulation and what our economy is heading towards here in the state of Minnesota. We were able to keep a small portion of that, but I do think it's worth noting this bill would have been a lot better keeping that language. When I was reviewing this bill and deciding whether or not I was going to vote for it, I wanted to look at some of the narratives in the State Competitiveness Fund, that the items we were going to go after. Some of the things in there are really great. Hydrogen, for instance, carbon storage validation and testing. Those are great things, but I think it was missing a lot of the things that I hear a lot about from Minnesotans. For instance, we were missing the conversation around nuclear as a whole. Again, you talk to any other developed Western country, they are looking at ways to develop nuclear on new scales to provide affordable and reliable power, especially in climates like ours. I wish we'd be leveraging those dollars. Again, it's worth mentioning that in my district, there is a deposit in Tamarack that is going to be crucial for the carbon capture and storage and sequestration technologies that are emerging. I've spoken about it before. Even the Biden administration has talked about the need to fund out carbon capture hubs across our country. Minnesota is one of the places we can do that. We would be a place that could actually have carbon negative industry. An industry that would really matter to me and my constituents would be carbon negative steel, which is something that we are on the verge of doing if we can couple federal dollars to invest in the correct way. We want to talk about making sure that we are the most competitive we can be. Well, it's beating out China from the steel that they dump on our shores. We already know that the best steel in the United States is mined right here in northern Minnesota, and now this would be a way for us to make sure that we are the most competitive globally. Again, all of that kind of messaging was missing from the governor's budget narrative for this fund, and I think that is a big concern of mine, but I'm hoping that in the conversation in the months to come, we can bring those kind of things to the table because they are going to be very, very crucial. I think it's also worth mentioning that this bill, again, kind of does not mention anything around biomass and renewable energies. You know, I have a muni in my district in the city of Hibbing that burns a lot of biomass to keep the lights on and steam for the residents of Hibbing, Minnesota. As that sits right now, we are not sure whether that qualifies as a renewable energy source. And if you ask anyone north of the Twin Cities, wood is a renewable energy source. And it's keeping the lights on for the people of Hibbing and keeping their homes warm. Again, I think this is something we could look into because the amount of carbon storage that goes through, I mean, the whole process behind biomass is actually quite extraordinary. When you think about the fact that as a tree matures and it gets older, it actually will start to emit more carbon than it would be sequestering in its lifespan. So if we take those mature trees and we turn them into wood products, we sequester carbon or we burn it and we plant more trees. For instance, a young popple stand of forest, that whip popple you see that's taking up a whole place that's been logged, that's sequestering carbon at 3 and 4 and 5 times more than a forest, than a full-grown forest. It's also helping make sure we don't have fires that emit more particulate. Who remembers the wildfires that we experienced all across Minnesota coming from Canada? That particulate in the air? You know, we made the joke, it was like smoking a pack of wildfires a day. We don't want that for our children, we don't want that for our citizens. That's why we have amazing forest management. So again, we could be using the dollars in this bill today to leverage more investment in forest management, but also in making sure that we can have biofuels and use wood as a heat source and a fuel source and an energy source. You know, the final thing when we talk about this bill, again, we're talking about a lot of money. You know, we're $115 million here from our state coffers to leverage dollars that may or may not come. I do want to appreciate that the A5 amendment was added to this bill today. So if something occurs at the federal level, these dollars will return back to the general fund and be used for the people of Minnesota. But I'm hoping right now for a robust way that we can leverage these dollars for good, not just to affect the nonprofits that might apply. We have some concerns there, and rightfully so. The people of Minnesota have seen fraud again and again over the past few years. We need to have faith and trust in government. If we don't, this system doesn't work. That's why all of us work so hard to communicate and work with our constituents. That's why we write letters, we take phone calls, we write emails, we show up for town halls. Because if there is not faith and trust in what we do, this whole system of our constitutional republic doesn't work. So I'm hopeful that in this bill today, if we move to pass it and we leverage these dollars, that we can have the real conversations about bringing technology and leveraging, working with our power producers, our munis, our communities, to make investments that are going to create generational differences, that are going to attract businesses to Minnesota. So we don't have Mr. Wonderful sitting in North Dakota talking about how he's spending millions of dollars there and he wouldn't come to Minnesota. Minnesota is the best state in the country. We all believe in that. That's why we're sitting here today. But we can do a lot more to make it better. One of the points that I've always found very, very inspiring about energy policy, there's been a lot of studies done, and I encourage the chamber to read about it. The best way to lower carbon emissions around our globe is to lift people out of poverty. If we give them lower electric prices, lower energy rates, it is proven economically that we could reduce carbon emissions globally by 18% by lifting people out of poverty. One of the ways you do that is reducing their energy rates. An energy rate is just another tax on your life, on you being able to life that you live every day, whether it be in Minnesota or across our country. And unfortunately, the energy policy we've seen move out of this chamber over the past few years is doing things to increase the price of energy. This bill we're working on today has a chance to leverage dollars to create affordable and reliable energy across our state that can make us a leader so that all people can be lifted up by lower energy rates, businesses can prosper, and Minnesota can attract future businesses. Again, it goes back to the comment I was making earlier tonight about tax base. If we inspire more business and develop in our communities, whether it be greater Minnesota, whether it be metro Minnesota, it's tax base for our schools, it's tax base for our communities, it's a reduction on LGA, it means our governments are going to prosper more and more without state assistance. That is what we want to do. You know, if you come up and drive Minnesota's Iron Range, especially if you come to Hibbing, for those of you who have been to Hibbing, how many of you have seen the Hibbing High School? It is one of the most gorgeous buildings in the state of Minnesota, and it was built by the investments of the mining industry. Painters came all the way across the ocean from Italy to paint the ceilings. Tiffany chandeliers, velvet seats in the auditorium, murals on the hallways, marble on the floors, because they had a good partner in a mining company that wanted to invest in the next generation. So if a mining company could do that for the city of Hibbing, not to mention the mining companies helped make this whole building we're sitting in here today, what would have happened if we could attract more future investment here? Because we have low energy rates, we have the greatest workforce, we all know that. We could really make a state that thrives and is a beacon not only for our country, but for the world. We would lead on a level of decreased carbon emissions and actually invest in the things we have here, in our wonderful wood basket, in our critical minerals. But those things cannot happen unless we have affordable and reliable electricity. This bill can help do that today, but again, it needs to address some of the things that I mentioned. We need to be talking about nuclear, we need to be talking about carbon capture and sequestration, and we need to be talking about biofuels and biomass. I'm hoping today that we can continue to have those conversations because I do share a lot of the same visions that the other side of the aisle cares for. We can be the leaders on carbon neutrality and business and economy. They go hand in hand, but it starts with investing in Minnesotans and investing in our resources and realizing that we have the best workforce and the best place in the country to do it. And we can do this right. Thank you.
The member from Goodhue, Representative Altendorf. The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate some of the comments tonight, and I am going to add to some of the things that have been talked about. First, I'm going to talk about what we're not doing. And Representative Anderson brought up education. And we do have a crisis right now in the state of Minnesota, particularly in literacy. Our kids cannot read. And yet, this is what we're doing with our time. We got some alarming news this afternoon in committee. The governor has dedicated in his budget $4 million to our nursing homes. $4 million. That is literally 0.02%.
Point of order?
I don't know what the point of order is for, but point of order.
Representative Hollins, for what purpose do you rise?
Masons 101, confining the remarks to the subject of the debate. We're not talking about nursing homes or literacy.
Representative Hollins, thank you for your point of order. I'm sorry, I was temporarily distracted. Representative New Brindley, please relate your comments to House File 1656. Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Hollins, for making my point for me. Instead of talking about education, instead of talking about our nursing homes, we are spending $115 million. And I wish, I haven't done the math, right? But as of a few weeks ago out of this chamber, we had already spent over $2 billion. That's billion with a B, $2 billion. And that was weeks ago. I haven't actually updated my list, so it's certainly much more than that now. I don't know, 4 billion? I don't know what we've spent by now. I don't think that included the school meals. Like, we've spent a lot of money out of this chamber. And now tonight we're spending another $115 million. And as Representative Holland said, we're not talking about education. We're not talking about nursing homes. Just today in committee, we talked about Representative Keel. She's got a nursing home closing in her district. Closing, shutting down. I don't know if you've been to her neck of the woods, but there's not a whole lot of opportunity for those folks. There's not a whole lot of places for them to go. Representative Altendorf and I have been talking quite a bit. She has a nursing home in crisis. And what's interesting there is that that nursing home is one of only two in the entire state that provides care for folks with traumatic brain injuries. But that's not what we're talking about tonight. We're not talking about that tonight. Instead, we're appropriating $115 million for grants, frankly, for energy products that, as Representative Schultz said, are unreliable, unaffordable, and dangerous for Minnesotans. Dangerous for Minnesotans. Not only that, we had this part of the bill actually made me giggle. I know you'll be surprised that I laughed, but it actually made me giggle. I was looking at subdivision 4, and this language, grants may be awarded under this section to entities with expertise and experience in grant development to assist eligible entities to prepare grant applications for federal funds. We're giving grants to get grants to get grants. What are we doing? What could possibly go wrong? And let's not forget, this is what the Office of the Legislative Auditor said. This is what he said about our state agencies. Our state agencies have pervasive non-compliance. Those were the words our state auditor used. Our legislative auditor used. Pervasive non-compliance for grant management by state agencies. And this is the level that we're working with. We're going to give grants to people who do grants so they can get other grants for people. What? This is bonkers. This is bonkers. So I'm wondering if Representative Acomb would yield for a question.
She will yield. Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Acomb. I appreciate that. Like I said, I'm looking at subdivision 4 in this language, and I really am concerned. I know you hear it from us a lot that we are really concerned about the state of nonprofits in the state of Minnesota and the lack of oversight in grants. And so I'm wondering, particularly this language, where can you just point me to either something in the bill or something elsewhere to give us some comfort on how oversight is going to take place to make sure that these grants are not mismanaged?
Representative Acomb.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative New Brindley, for the question. So to provide a little clarification and maybe better understanding for that section of the bill, it's recognizing that we have a large state and we have regional development authorities that are well established within communities to work with our local co-ops and municipalities to apply for some of these grants. And I think we all do better when we're working with people that we know. And so for a local co-op utility in your community, it probably is going to prefer to engage with a local economic development group, such as some of the authorities across the state, than it would be dealing with folks in St. Paul. And so this is with that in mind to allow entities that would be applying for grants, like co-ops or munis or cities, to deal with organizations and people that they know within their community.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So what I heard from that is that there is no language in this bill about oversight. There is no language to correct the pervasive non-compliance in grant management in our state agencies. It's not in this bill. But we're going to dump another $115 million here into grants going to people to get grants for other people. That's what we're doing in this bill. And it's no small amount of money. It's a lot of money. $300,000 for some, up to $15 million for others. There's no small amount of money. But I suspect what we are supposed to do is just trust them. They'll be fine. Don't worry, the departments have told us they'll manage it. They'll do it right. They'll make sure everybody's on track doing it right. Folks, $115 million. That's what we're talking about tonight. And as Representative Holland said, we're not talking about nursing homes. We're not talking about education. We're talking about $115 million in grants with no additional accountability, no correction of the pervasive non-compliance that we already see, no correction. But again, governor's budget, we talked about it today, $4 million for our nursing homes. Do you know what that amounts to? 0.02%. 0.02% of our budget surplus. That's what we've got for our senior citizens. But we're going to throw away $115 million here to give grants to people who write grants for other people to get grants. That's what we're going to do, $115 million for that. It's pretty wild. I'll be voting no. I'm sure that's no surprise. But everyone should be voting no. I mean, at some point, I keep thinking, I keep hoping that we'll get some priorities straight, that we'll start caring about our vulnerable Minnesotans, that we'll start taking care of people. But we haven't done that yet. I won't hold my breath, but the least we can do tonight is say, listen, we're going to take a pause. We're going to stop spending money frivolously and spend it where it matters. We're going to spend it on our vulnerable Minnesotans, on our senior citizens, on our kids, on our disabled community. We haven't spent a dime on those people yet. Let's get with the program. Vote no on this bill.
The member from Goodhue, Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today. I'm sitting on the Energy Committee, and you know, this has been, obviously, I'm a newly elected representative, and it's just been very interesting to watch this really be the process go through what I would suggest in kind of a backwards fashion. We watched the Clean Energy 2040 or the blackout bill go through in a record amount of time. It went through in just weeks as we sat in this legislative session. And yet, being a member of that committee, being a newly elected representative, we spent little to no time in the committee really discussing things that would be important in making that decision about, you know, megawatts and how much energy we need and where it comes from and the MISO grid. That did not come in the first couple weeks of session as we were coming to make this very important decision. Instead, we had this bill come very quickly. It went through one committee. It did not go through a regular process. And then we set a goal. 2040 carbon-free Minnesota. That was the goal that we set.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Representative Long, for what purpose do you rise?
Since 101, we are not debating the 100% clean energy bill right now.
Members, please make a relationship between your comments to the bill, House File 1656. Representative Altendorf, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. And the reason why I am talking about that is we set the goal for the 2040 energy plan, and now in hindsight, we are passing legislation that meets that. So instead of doing it the opposite way, which was the point that I was making, the point is that would have been reasonable, would have been smart, common sense, good business, good judgment for the state of Minnesota to map out the plan, to know exactly what this would cost for us to get there to reach our goal. Now, because we have the goal, everything else that's coming through is automatically justified. That's what's happening. When I am sitting in the Energy Committee, I hear bill after bill that does not have fiscal notes, that we are not seeing the budget impact that that's going to have on us in Minnesota. And yet everything needs to be justified because I hear over and over that we have set a 2040 energy plan. So this is relevant to the discussion. This is relevant to the discussion because we set the goal before we set the plan to get there. As we are seeing government subsidize more and more money to these projects, there certainly are a lot of problems. And one of them coming from a highly a community that's very, very high in agriculture, as we are seeing government subsidize solar, subsidize wind, this is taking away from our agricultural base. It is taking away from good cropland, and it's also driving up the prices of our land, which drives up the prices for farmers, which in return is driving up the price of food for Minnesota. Just this week, we celebrated that it was National Egg Day. And we should all be celebrating this in this chamber because Minnesota ranked seventh in the production of agriculture. This is a huge portion of our economy. This is a huge amount of dollars that's coming into our economy that then we are drawing taxes from those. And we are not considering the ramifications as we continue to pass bill after bill. We are taking good farmland in Minnesota and converting it over to solar and wind. The future ramifications that this is going to have on Minnesota and on our food. Madam Chair, can I ask Representative Bjorn Olsen to yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Altendorf.
Thank you. My question is, in your area, coming from an agriculture area, what have you seen in the increase in price per acres?
Representative Olsen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the question. That's a really interesting one. So to give you a little bit of a background about where I come from, my aunt is actually the county assessor for one of the counties that I represent, and she recently told me, she said, Bjorn, our entire county is worth $4 billion. So she's the county assessor, so she knows what the county's worth. She says it's worth $4 billion, and of those $4 billion, $3.3 billion is farmland. 3.3 billion of the 4 billion is farmland, and then another 300 million is ag-related structures. So when you're talking about a county in which I live, or a county in my area, we're about 90% agriculture. So that's just giving you a foundation of how valuable this amazing industry is for southern Minnesota. We are 90% agriculture or agricultural related. And then the other 300 million are people's houses that kind of support the industry that is, in fact, agriculture. It's a great and wonderful and honorable profession to be a part of. But the question was, what is happening to the price of land? And I'll tell you, members, it has gotten to the point where I, as a young farmer myself, have been priced out of this game. We have a small farm where I come from. I farm about 200 acres myself. My father has 1,200 that he farms, and together we have what is identified as a small family farm. We're not phenomenally wealthy human beings. People would say maybe we're cash poor and dirt rich, right? They always talk about that. Oh, he's dirt rich and he's cash poor. And that's kind of the scenario in which we find ourselves. Because the land is what is truly expensive and unattainable for someone to find. And guess what, members? It's the only thing we're not getting more of. I guess unless you go to Hawaii, there are some active volcanoes that are in fact creating land, but that's volcanic pumice or whatever that geographical or geological word technically is. I'm not sure. But we've just had a couple really amazing sales, and I've been running the numbers in my mind, and I can't imagine how you could ever afford such a thing making the margins that we make. And members, in fact, in our local area, we just recently had a farm sell for nearly $14,990 an acre. $14,990 an acre. The individual who bought it, when asked, why in the world would you spend that much money on that land? Because members, for those of you who don't know, because I'm sure there's a lot of individuals on both sides of the aisle that don't know, we kind of price in our budget. We say if you make a $100 bill at the end of the day on every acre that you farm, you've done okay. If you walk away with a $100 bill, you are okay. So at $14,990 an acre.
Representative Olson, I'm going to remind you that the bill that we're debating relates to energy funding. Please address your comments to the bill. Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would remind the body that the question that was asked to me was in fact regarding land prices, and I believe the Speaker recognized me to answer said question. So I do in fact believe that regardless of what topic we are talking about, I do believe that I have the floor, and the question that I'm answering was recognized by the Speaker as pertinent to the discussion. That is what I would believe. She can, and that's fine with her if she would like to, but I'm just waiting for it. So, to wrap this up, the individual who bought the land stated, I am not buying it for myself. I'm not buying it for my children. I am buying it for my children's children. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the question. I hope I answered it appropriately and well to the point of what was asked of me on this here House floor. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Olson. And this is my point. He is saying that acreage has been driven up just to an obscene amount of money, $14,000. This is driving farmers out of business. This is driving new people who want to take over family farms. They're absolutely not able to do this anymore. And it's a direct result of this money being funneled. The government is funneling money, subsidizing solar, subsidizing wind. So what we're seeing is that investors are coming into auctions in agriculture, and they are buying up large amounts of land. To give you the information on that, this is all related to energy, because as we are pouring the money into solar and to wind, investors are buying up our land, Minnesota. This is not what we want to do. This is not the direction we want to go. Now, if I was a farmer and I am renting my land to another farmer, actually, Madam Speaker, could I have Representative Jacob yield to a question?
Depends on what the question is, Representative Altendorf.
It's how much does a farmer get for rent for an acre?
Can you relate your question to the bill?
Yes, it's about the money subsidizing energy is driving up the cost of our agricultural land, which is eventually going to hurt every Minnesotan as our food is driven up. So it's actually very, very relevant.
And who did you ask to yield?
Representative Jacob.
He will yield. Representative Jacob.
Thank you. Land prices, rent prices could vary from potentially as low as $150 an acre up to, $300, $400 an acre, depending on, what the quality of the land is, what it's being used for. In Winona County, we're seeing more and more solar farms go in. than what you could imagine. We've got literally the grid is limited in Winona County to the point that we can't even add any more solar systems to our grid in Winona County. So it's making a huge difference on what the farmers can do with their property, the price of the property, and the values of the property. So, yeah. Thank you.
Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Jacob. So as he said, we are renting farmer to farmer. We're renting our land. He said anywhere from $150 per acre up to $400 per acre. Now, that same farmer, or if an investor came and bought that land, they would rent out that same acreage of land anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 per acre for solar. So this is an obvious question. If you are a farmer, are you going to rent your land at approximately, let's even give them the high end, let's give them the $400 an acre. Would you rent your land out to another farmer for agricultural purposes? Or would you rent it to a solar farm and get $1,000 to $1,500 an acre? I think that's really obvious to see. And this is the problem that we're having, is that we're falsely driving the market up of land, of agriculture. We're pushing small farmers, startup farmers, generational farms. The next children that are coming from generational farms will not be able to purchase and buy out their land, their farm at these prices. Because the government, us, we are falsely inflating the market by subsidizing these dollars. So my point, we are leaning very heavily towards solar and wind turbines. That's where we're investing our money. And yet, if you go to Bloomberg, which is a very liberal publication, they just came out, it was like in the last month, and they said, you know, wind turbines are falling over. You can look it up. So we are now moving towards wind turbines that have a shelf life of approximately 20 to 25 years. And we're going to pretend that this is green, that this is a good way for us to go in Minnesota. If you were someone that lived 80 to 80 years old, which I think is a pretty average age for most people, do you think it is a very green, an energy efficient, reliable way to replace wind turbines 4 times over your life? Have we all seen the size of wind turbines? Also, to be noted, these are not recyclable. So when the wind turbines are falling over, we are landfilling them. That just doesn't seem like a very green way to go with our energy and for Minnesotans to be spending our money in this direction. If you ask any person, I would venture to bet that everybody wants clean energy. But we want to do it in a way that's safe, reliable, affordable, and this is not any of those things. We are setting rural Minnesota, greater Minnesota up for failure. As the metro area is pushing and pushing this agenda, they are pushing the infrastructure, the solar panels, the wind turbines out to the agricultural districts. They are taking our farmland, which again, I'm going to say it again, is driving up the price of food. That affects every person in Minnesota. And this is something that we should not take lightly because this has just started. There's many other ways that we could do this. We could make sure we could pass legislation right here in this body that we are doing things like a solar garden or over a parking lot. Why are we allowing Minnesota, our farmland, to be used for these projects? Why are we pushing it out of the metro where you're not looking at it every day here in the metro? But it's going to drive up the price of our land. You also can look, I like to use things that you can easily look up. So please go ahead and Google, the largest solar farm in the world is being put in Indiana. This solar farm is 13,000 acres. You can look it up. You can look it up. 13,000 acres in Indiana. That is 2 million solar panels. 2 million. Think of the resources that it would take to put that many solar panels on 13,000 acres. And every time we are taking this agricultural land out of production, we are hurting the consumers of Minnesota and of America. We cannot continue to afford to do this. So today I ask that we say no to this bill. Please vote no against it. And let's reevaluate. And please, we could do clean energy in a more responsible way without subsidizing it to this level. We can do clean energy without subsidizing nonprofits and groups that are taking all of this money from the taxpayers' dollars, and then it's driving up our agricultural land, driving up our food prices. Vote no.
The member from Traverse, Representative Backer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My seatmate took some of my steam on the agriculture, and I appreciate that. But two things that we want to talk about in regards with investing, I want to call it investing. I call it actually wasting $115 million. Because what we're doing is we are using those funds in really an unpredictable way of producing energy. How many of you guys in the summertime want to go to a lake and the weather person said, you know what, tomorrow's going to be sunny, but the next day it's not sunny? And that's the challenges that we have with just not solar, but wind. One thing that my seatmate didn't share about with agriculture, the problem with wind and investing these type of resources or spending in these resources is the production of crops. Because when you put a big windmill in the area, you cannot anymore apply fertilizer or other products on that field in the air, and not just there, but next to that field. And also if you have these solar, and I don't like to use garden because it talks about growing. In 20 years, this stuff won't grow. So we'll call these solar areas. It really limits what you can do for production. And that is something Minnesota up in the Red River Valley has a wonderful tradition of high value land because of what we can produce. Year after year, we're talking about, we have people who've been on farms for 60, 70, 80 years. Their families, not just one person, but generation after generation. At max with solar, we can get 20, but we're talking about in the bill that we want efficient energy, renewable energy. When the weather doesn't cooperate, you don't have renewable energy. The second thing I want to talk about, it's a grant process. Minnesota doesn't have the best track record for grants. We had something that happened in Representative Baker's area, Feeding the Future, that we had grant funds that weren't used correctly. for feeding children. Well, this is the same grant process. Are we going? I'm concerned about the language in the bill on administering it is because it looks green, we're just going to fund it. So those things are the two concerning. Number one, how it affects us in west central Minnesota. Because right now, if you go from Iowa to Canada, we no longer have a larger community on our side, and this will continue to drive people away. And it concerns me because we're not going to have a reliable, renewable energy source for children and grandchildren in our next generation. Thank you, members.
I recognize the member from Nobles, Representative Fogelman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, one thing that all the bills that we pass require are citizens of this state, because the citizens are the people paying the taxes. Now, I just read something that we are number 6 for people leaving our state. From 2020 to 2021, over 13,000 people left our state. In 21 to 22, we had over 19,000 people leaving our state. Now, that might not seem a lot up here when there's millions of people, but if you look at that, over 30,000 people leaving, that would be almost my entire district. How is this helpful to anybody? And why are they leaving? You might have your own thoughts, but my thoughts is that we're not addressing issues that we need to be. We're worried more about all this green energy that isn't green instead of addressing things that are important to the people of Minnesota, which is safety, education, less taxes, and less regulation. We're not keeping businesses, and we're not keeping citizens. And if we don't have those, we don't have much of a state, and we don't have people to pay for these things that you are trying to pass. Please vote no.
I recognize the member from Douglas, Representative Franzen.
Thank you, members. So listening to the floor debate and talking about energy and high prices of energy, I just want to let you know what's going around the world. So we've done the headlines before. I'll refresh you on some recent headlines. March 18th, Reuters. Credit Suisse weighs survival options as regulators push UBS deal. Climate Bank. Credit Suisse publishes climate action plan for its investment areas. Let's see here. The Green Tories were warned. Bank of England should not be made to go green, warns former BOE governor. That was a Daily Telegraph on the 12th of March of 2021. That's a little old one. But we have here from yesterday, it was today the 23rd, right? March 22nd, Shell warns IPCC's net zero target may not be hit until, anybody have the answer here? The year 2100. 2100. Now, it's 2023. I am 46 years old. I really will not live. I know. It's coconut oil and joy of the Lord. It's what it is. But I will not live to see year 2100. Okay? And most likely, majority of us in this room won't be. Okay? The UN's newest climate report is a woke dumpster fire masquerading as science. It was March 21st. UN report predicting climate catastrophe in 2030 met with mockery Every single prediction has been wrong. But this body is going to be spending tons and tons of money just so you can feel good about yourself, even though the expectations you lay on Minnesotans and the horror stories are not going to come into fruition like every other horror story told before. Okay. UN climate study proves the fight to lower global temps won't work. That's the New York Post on March 20th. Matthew Lynn, the UN scientific climate report is nothing more than confected hysteria. That was the Daily Telegraph, March 21st, 2021 again. Okay, so Michael Schellenberger, the UN is a climate disinformation threat actor. Public Substack, you can read his Substack, very good information. That was March 20th. Brendan O'Neill, climate hysteria is a luxury belief we can no longer afford. Spiked, March 21st. The Spectator writes, by Ross Clark, the UN's global net zero target isn't realistic. March 23rd, that's today. The Financial Times writes, Germany's risks running out of gas next winter, regulator warns. Now imagine we're in one of our little cold snaps, and CenterPoint Energy says, we may run out of gas. Those of you that are hooked up to gas, you may freeze to death. That's what may happen in Germany. German government signals energy crisis subsidies are not sustainable. Well, I suppose when you run out of people's money, things may not become sustainable. And that sounds like what's happening in Germany. They are running out of people's money, kind of like the budget that we are discussing here on the House floor one of these days. Running out of people's money, spending us into oblivion. Yeah, okay. Then we have bleak warning issued over net zero drive as UK left in a lot of trouble. That's GB News, March 22nd. Rishi Sunak's crazy fracking ban. Cost of UK energy imports more than doubles. That was City AM, March 22nd. The Wall Street Journal. Let's bring it home. Let's bring it home. The Wall Street Journal, the 23rd of March, that's today. Big oil in North Africa may save Europe from energy sector disaster. Big oil to the rescue in Europe. Thank you, America. The Times. Why Britain has big plans to join the rush for small modular reactors. Britain, ahead of the curve. Minnesota doesn't even want to discuss nuclear reactors. Fox News, I know you guys, some of you don't like Fox News, but the headline says, Biden's climate change zealotry contributed to Silicon Valley Bank collapse, Republican attorneys general charge. Yeah. So that's a little headlines from across the world. We see what we're dealing with nationally. And also globally. But for some reason, the lessons of Europe, Germany, UK, et cetera, do not resonate with this body. Now, to talk a little bit about the bill here in front of me, this bill is going to rely on a lot of children. It's going to rely on a lot of slave labor. It is going to make things worse, okay? Because these solar panels do not build themselves. They do not mine themselves. It takes labor. And we heard already the dismal reading scores Minnesotan children have, and the fact that they can't do math, they can't add 2 plus 2. These days, 2 plus 2 is 5. If somebody wants to believe 2 plus 2 is 5, it's 5. But you know what? Whose lives are also being robbed? Are the children who are digging in mines to make your reality possible.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
Representative Igbaje, state your point of order.
Masons 101, debate must be confined to the questions before the body. We're talking about a government grant funding program.
Representative Franson, please confine your remarks to the question before the body, which is a passage of House File 1656. Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, would Representative Acom yield to a question?
She will yield. Representative Franson.
Representative Acom, in this bill, House File 1656, I've read it, I don't see it. Are there any caveats in House File 1656 that would ban child or slave labor?
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Acom.
House File 1656, Representative Franson, is a bill to provide grants to communities and utilities across our state to apply for federal funding coming through the bipartisan infrastructure law and the IRA. It also provides smaller grants to help those communities that don't have the capacity to be able to apply for grants. Maybe they don't have enough staff in their office or the experience applying for federal grants. So it gives them the ability to get some help to help them apply for these grants to implement the programs within the federal IRA and IIJA.
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So what I'm hearing is the answer is no. There's language in here on energy projects. Energy projects would mean turbines and solar panels. And we know that the majority of the minerals used in these items do not come from Minnesota. We are not mining minerals for wind turbines. We are not mining minerals for solar panels yet. But they come from countries that rely on child labor and slave labor. That is the facts. That is not hyperbole. That is not fake news. That is reality. So under this bill, if there are developments going in for solar panels, those minerals are mined in countries used for slave labor and child labor. And if you recall last year, many of you were still here, I went through the horrors that those in China who are being held captive against their own will, the horrors that they face, being beaten, being raped, killed. Many commit suicide because it is so awful. The conditions are so horrid. Suicide is better. So, as you think about this, and you think about all the money that's going to be coming into Minnesota, and all the solar panels that are going to be put into Minnesota, and all the wind turbines that are going to go up in Minnesota, they are made with human rights abuses. That is something that this body should stand against. And every time when I try to bring up amendments to highlight and say, you know what, this body is going to stand against slave labor and child labor. We're going to make sure that the minerals are mined ethically and with labor standards and with a living wage. They are voted down. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And looking at this bill, I'm going to talk about federal dollars and grants and federal funded projects. My first project that was federally funded, and it was actually close to here, not too many miles away, but it was a little bit before the turn of the century. It's sort of fun to be able to say that. And the total investment on the project was in the 9 figures. I'm not sure what the exact grant was. I was a technical person, didn't see the dollars, but I can't tell you too much because we were opto-isolated. Our lab was copper shielded with vault doors to go in and out so that a satellite would see just a black spot. And I can tell you there are requirements for some of the federal projects that entail additional work. The reason I can't tell you is I had a top secret information clearance for that one. My next experience with grants was I was in a physics program, the doctoral student, and there were a lot of NASA grants that people were working on, and got to see some of the fun you have to go through to get those. But the one that I was part of was the superconducting super collider they were building in Waxahachie. We were going to build a scintillating fiber detector for Higgs boson and other research, and dug the hole, spent some money, and it disappeared. And that was my experience of federal dollars and these grants don't always fund resolutions. I had, after that, worked on some DARPA projects and others in technical companies. But what I've learned from those different experiences is it's intelligent to focus the area that you're pursuing the grants in. So instead of just saying, we're going to throw this money up for grants, we should look at what types of areas will best be applied to Minnesota, were most applicable to the businesses and the citizens of our state. We had the tribes here earlier. Representative, you might want to pick that up so you don't roll over it. Wogamon. Sorry about that. But the tribes were here, and I was speaking with some of the leaders. And there's a great concern about the storage at the nuclear site. And I said, what about these small modular nuclear plants? They've got designs, they've got experimental ones running around in different parts of the world. What if we had some of them in Minnesota that would take the waste uranium and the nuclear that's sitting in casks in Prairie Island and use that for projects of these small modular nuclear plants? So now you're getting rid of those casks that are sitting there. The tribe doesn't want it there. A lot of people don't. And you would be using new technology. You'd be getting rid of a problem. And you'd be having carbon-free energy. That's the type of thing that this bill should have included, because we should focus on granting projects that work for Minnesota, will help Minnesota, and are relevant. And I wish that this bill contained some of that direction. Because let us think about where we want to be and how we'll get there, because a lot of projects aren't really great for Minnesota because we have this thing called winter and real cold weather. But there are some projects that are good for Minnesota. And we've got people at the U of M, we've got corporate people in our state that we could bring together and promote the projects we need to move forward. I'm not seeing that there. I worry that it'll go to a project that will get started, a lot of money will be spent, but there won't be an end result because Washington has changed its mind or it didn't seem practical. That happens. I've seen it in the past. So we should do the extra due diligence to focus. If we're going to spend over $100 million and leverage that for possibly billions, let's pick projects and technologies that'll make Minnesota better, make Minnesota a leader. That's what we should be doing with our bills and our money. And unfortunately, I don't think this bill in its current form does that. Thank you.
The member from Mauer, Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members, for this discussion of this bill. You know, the reason I rise today to talk about this bill is because I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated that this bill is making me choose right now. See, my community's never asked for House File 7. My community's never asked for us to pass House File 7. And it's because we did that they need this money. Because the advocacy groups have said that we can't possibly meet the 2040 goal without receiving money from the federal government. We can't do it. Physically can't do it. Never mind that technology doesn't exist, never mind that all this stuff has happened, and never mind that, you know, we're trying to do something so quickly that isn't even something that wants to be done by our general public. Never mind all of that. But the truth is, this is making me choose. Choose between what I know to be fiscally responsible, which is to not continue borrowing money from a government that is so far in debt that it can never recover, and also trying to do what my constituents have asked me to do, which is please let me have resources to get done what you have mandated us to do. So now I have to choose. And I like to say, for all of you who are watching and all of you who have talked to me about please give me the money, I want to. I want to do this. I know this money will go to an energy policy that, frankly, you didn't want, you didn't ask for, and we don't want either. And I don't want to have to make this choice. And so today, though while I support what my groups have asked me to do, have asked me to give them, I also want to say to them as they're listening, I'm sorry that you were put in this position. I'm sorry that you are putting us in the position that you are requiring us to do an irresponsible, fiscally irresponsible decision tonight so that you can meet the demands of something that we have mandated to you, and I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry if you see today that my vote is red because I want to still maintain some shred of fiscal conservatism. I'm sorry if you see my vote red today. Doesn't mean that I don't support you. It means that you were put in a position that is untenable and should never have happened. So members, I ask you to vote red.
The member from Sherburne, Representative Meckland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Caught me off guard there, sorry. So one of the members mentioned earlier today about 31,000 wind turbines. And I know we've heard some others about overregulation in northern Minnesota, but out of those 31,000 turbines, 279 million tons of copper, 80.6 million tons of concrete, 20,770,000 million of steel and iron and of tons of steel and iron, and 21,700,000 of other rare metals, just in the turbines. And they don't operate it at a 80 or 90% capacity like nuclear. Many have mentioned nuclear tonight. I believe the nuclear is what we should be investing in, like I believe it is Wyoming. So we have reliable base load. And as many have mentioned, this new micro nuclear generation has virtually no waste. Takes up a tiny little footprint. Sherburne County is facing 20,000 acres of solar projected right now. It's 20% of all of our agricultural land. That's how we tie agricultural land into energy, Madam Speaker, because they're taking up all our agricultural land. I've heard the argument that it's doing the farmers well to pay them $1,400 an acre. Well, maybe we could go back to the micro-nuclear, get Representative Stevens' marijuana bill passed and let them grow that instead, and they'd make even more money. You know, if we keep occupying all this agricultural land, 20 years from now, when Representative Davids is still sitting here, he's going to be hearing about the food shortage. So, this has got a bunch of... Sorry, Madam Speaker. A much greater impact than I think everybody's taken into account. We tend to do all these things and we deal with the unintended consequence later. And right now, later is becoming now. If we can see the food prices in the grocery stores, we see the egg prices, we see the feed prices. The fuel prices that the farmers are going to pay to put it in, take it out, fertilize it, pesticide it, all the stuff they got to do, and then dry it with propane. What are we all going to eat? Can't eat solar panels. Can eat crickets and bugs, I hear. I'll let the turkeys eat the crickets and bugs, and I'll eat the darn turkey, because when I clean a field wild turkey, they're full of crickets and bugs. It's kind of gross. Acorns, too. You know, I see what's going to, I mean, I have the fear of where this is all headed and what's going to happen to our entire agricultural society out of the push for our energy sector and the changes that are being made when there's clearly much better, reliable, affordable energy and the technology that's being developed in other states. And I don't really want to gamble on solar. As some others have mentioned, a neighbor of mine has put on solar on his rooftop. He put it on somewhere around September. 18 weeks, they were pure white. I kept counting because I have to drive by it every day. I hope he didn't spend too much money on it because his ROI right now must not be doing too good. And then from my understanding, he's not in Excel territory, so he doesn't get all the rebates either, because I once looked into it years ago. ROI, return on investment, sorry. So, I hope that at the end of the day, when we're going to take $115 million state tax dollars so that we can go chasing a bunch of printed federal tax dollars, that we could spend it in much better ways. There are people who genuinely need it. We could spend a lot less than we're spending on all this solar. You notice how Excel won't even tell us what this massive solar project costs? They call it proprietary information. This 460 megawatt thing, which is 3,200 acres of prime farmland. 3,200 is the first phase. And then there's another 280 RFP, so that's another 2,000 acres. That puts us at 52, and then phase 3 and 4 is going to be about 20,000 total, which is 20% of all the agricultural land in Sherburne County. Excuse me. I hope that brighter minds and wiser minds will prevail long term, thinking about our children, what they're going to eat, and how there's 2 young children between 2 of these deaths that were recently born that just are going to inherit an awful lot of debt out of this IRA money. And I know when I talk to people in my district, their number one ask is to get their tax dollars back. Not spend more, not grow budgets, not spend it on other things, not chase printed money. They want their money back. Hope we can do better. Thank you. Oh, it's not Madam Speaker anymore. You changed on me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Myers.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask if Chair Acomb would yield to a few questions.
Representative Myers, we only yield to one question at a time, but she will yield to a question. Representative Myers.
Perfect. I will start with my first question then. I noticed in the bill that it talks about the formation of a task force, and I'm just wanting to get a little bit more information from you on how that task force was determined.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Acomb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative, for the question. So in determining who would be involved with the task force, it was talking to the Department of Commerce, the utilities that are going to be utilizing this program, and so it was a group of advocates and stakeholders.
Representative Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Chair Acomb yield to another question?
Chair Acomb will yield to another question. Representative Myers.
Chair Acomb, I also noticed in there that there's a date of this ending on June 30th, 2034, and I'm just wondering how that date came about.
Representative Acomb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The date is because of the length of the federal programs, and the IIJA and the IRA are have a long time horizon, and so it's to ensure that Minnesota can be participating in all of the grant programs throughout their lifespan.
Representative Myers.
Mr. Speaker, would Chair Acomb yield to maybe one more question?
She will yield to maybe one more question. Representative Myers.
So, you know, I'm new to this body. The federal dollars are available. Don't know if they've started flowing in yet, but Chair Acomb, do you have an idea with what we're putting aside, how long it'll take for that money is all used up?
Representative Acomb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative. So that's uncertain, but what I will say is given the interest from the utilities and communities around the state, I think that the funds will go quickly. I think that they're the really beneficial part for Minnesota is that for every dollar of investment, we should get $7 to $8 back in return. So our $115 million will leverage really good investments for Minnesota.
Representative Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chair Acomb, for that. You know, this body, you know, what was it, a month and a half ago, passed 2040 clean energy. And, you know, that is something that is important to me. You know, recently had a hearing where I was promoting protecting our waters, protecting our fisheries, and, you know, I even offered an amendment during that time that allowed a little bit more time. It was a 2050 amendment. The body decided then that this is something that they wanted to move forward with. They voted, that bill passed. In my city council roles, when I've been on the minority side of decisions, I'm usually not the person that just folds his arms, turns away, and says, you guys figure it out. That being said, there are some good things with this bill. You know, I would have loved to seen the Mecklen amendment added to this, but there are some opportunities like Representative Igo detailed, Representative Mueller detailed, that this bill will help with. Is it a perfect bill? No, it's not. Is it going to take advantage of the potential to bring additional dollars to Minnesota? It is. Is it going to cover everything that I want it to cover? It's not. But when I look at a lot of these bills and when I make a decision on voting on them, a lot of times it's not because these bills are 90% good. A lot of times I look at them and they're 60% good, 51%. You know, this is one of these bills that I'm going to be thinking about here for, I don't know how much longer I'll be able to think about it because it's getting late. But I at least wanted this body to know that there are some good things from my side that I believe that my district would like. I just hope that we can look at how these grants are implemented, who's using them. We've all worked for nonprofits or volunteered for nonprofits. We know we want those dollars to go as far as possible, and I hope that this bill will allow us to do that. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I may move that the House be allowed to meet past midnight.
Representative Long moves that the House be allowed to meet past midnight. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I have appreciated the debate tonight on this. I do care about some of the projects that have been talked about in this bill, but I'm very concerned about spending the $115 million as a state when this was directed by the federal government to be matching funds that the individual cities and counties would put up. And I just think that we are not upholding our fiduciary responsibility by sort of getting the cities and counties off the hook for their part of having skin in the game. That's important to good management of these projects. The state has many other priorities for spending state money on state projects. I know we've talked about some of them in terms of some of the things I've really cared about as the nursing homes and the K-3 literacy. I've had a bill on that for 3 years. That's never had a hearing, but it's a huge priority for me. So I think the state dollars should be focused on state needs and that we should encourage the locals to come up with the matching funds. And I hope, members, that as we go forward, this doesn't become a pattern. I've seen since COVID a lot of effort across the board for the state to pay things that normally have been out of our purview. And I think that's a dangerous trend, and we need to rein back in and stay in our lane so that we have the fiscal discipline and responsibility we need, because there won't always be a $17.5 billion surplus. And when lean times come, we don't want to have created a lot of dependency that will be very painful for our citizens if we have to change course. So, members, I urge caution on this, and I urge a no vote.
The member from Crow Wing, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I don't know about you, but I'm getting real tired. But after midnight, I do get a second wind, so that's good. But I am really tired right now, so I'm going to try and I'll do my best, Madam Speaker, to stay on point. But this bill seems like a kickstart for the new Green Deal, or excuse me, for the Green New Deal, right in our own backyard, Minnesota. When Minnesotans are struggling in their finances. They're paying their bills with credit cards, a darn box of eggs, the 5 dozen box of eggs. Oh my gosh, I can't even speak. 5 dozen eggs. It comes in a box. You buy it at Costco. It's like $30 for that box right now. People are struggling, and here we're looking at kickstarting the Green New Deal in Minnesota. This bill has a $115 million appropriation. The $100 million of it is for federal match awards. Think about that, federal match awards, $100 million for federal match awards, federal money. You know, the stuff that we just print off like crazy with nothing to back it up. Federal government needs more money, they just start printing it. We're screaming towards $32 trillion in debt as a nation. And Minnesotans are struggling to pay their bills so much that they got to go into credit card debt. In fact, you know, Mary's good at the newspaper article headlines. I saw a headline yesterday saying that we've set a new record for credit card debt in this nation. That right there is proof that people are struggling, and we're kickstarting the Green New Deal here in Minnesota. So $100 million is for federal match awards, $6 million for grant writing assistance, $750,000, which to me that's a lot of money, is required just for reports and audits for the Department of Commerce by this legislation. $6.75 million is for information system development improvements necessary to carry out this program. That is a lot of money, members. $115 million. And again, I'll just remind you, I said it once, we're screaming towards $32 trillion national debt. And 5 weeks ago, I just had a son that we brought forth into this world. Brought forth into this outer world. He actually came into the world 9 months prior. And I'm looking at all this stuff, and I'm going, my God, what are we doing? What are we doing as a state and as a nation for my son's generation? It's not good. We're spending a lot of money on wind turbines. I'll throw the number out there for the third time tonight, Representative Mecklen, 31,000 wind turbines. I know a little bit about I know a little bit about wind turbines. Can you tell I'm tired? I know where they end up. And yeah, I've been told, I believe it was by someone from Great River Energy that told me after committee one day, oh no, we're recycling all of our wind turbines that burn out. You know, those blades don't last forever on those wind turbines. And have you noticed how big they are? And do you know what they're made out of? And do you know how much carbon is produced in order to make them? A lot. They're made out of fiberglass. And I know where they end up because I have I'm going to pull the brother-in-law card here. I got a brother-in-law who lives out in Wyoming. And every summer we like to make a trip out there to visit them. It's a beautiful country. And you look off into the horizon, you see beautiful sunsets and wind turbines. And he works at this place called the landfill. You see, he left Minnesota to go to Wyoming because he sees what's happening in Minnesota. But he goes out to Wyoming and he gets a job working in the landfill. And let me tell you, out in Wyoming, they love hiring Minnesotans who flee to their state because they're hardworking people. And it's unfortunate that we're losing them. But he lives out there in Casper, Wyoming. He works at a landfill, and he tells me a lot about these wind turbine blades. He knows exactly where they're ending up because he's got to look at them every day he goes to work. You see, they're not being recycled. He said to me, Ben, these blades on these wind turbines are filling up our landfill and they're just sitting there rotting. And they're running out of room to put them in places at the landfill. So there's a good picture of what green energy looks like today. Thousands and thousands, millions probably, tons of fiberglass blades from wind turbines sitting in a landfill out in Wyoming. What a beautiful picture. I wonder how long it's going to take for those wind turbines to break down, those blades. Yeah. A member just said to me, they won't break down. They'll just sit there. To me, this is unaffordable. This plan is unreliable, and it is not safe for the environment. And you might think it is. And you might tell yourself that when you lay down at night to go to bed, we're doing the right thing here, when in reality, that's not what's happening at all. I want affordable energy for my son, I want reliable energy for my son, and I want safe energy for my son. And some of you may argue, well, then you better start thinking about his future because all this stuff we're doing right now is going to destroy his future. Yeah, you know how long I've been hearing that all my life? It's fear-based, and when we operate on a base of fear, we make really bad decisions. I want to make smart decisions for my 5-week-old son, not fear-based decisions. I should have looked this up, but I didn't. But I remember years ago, Al Gore telling us that the earth would be destroyed by now. He's got a new date out there now about when the earth is going to be destroyed. I can't remember when it was. You know, the theology expert Greta Thunberg just deleted a tweet. Some of you are laughing because you know what I'm talking about. She was just given a doctorate in theology, just awarded to her. Sorry, I'll stay on point, Madam Speaker. I'm sorry. She just deleted a tweet from 5 years ago. You want to know why she deleted the tweet? Because 5 years ago, she had a tweet that said, the earth will be destroyed in 5 years. She just deleted it. Yeah. And again, folks, I want to take care of the environment. I just think the direction that we're going, the path that we're screaming down, is being fueled with fear. And I think we need to go back to the drawing board and rethink what we're doing here in Minnesota. Because again, I want affordable, reliable, and safe energy for my 5-week-old son. And I don't want our landfills filling up with wind turbine blades. And I'm sure there's someone from across the aisle who will debate back at me, argue back at me, no, we're recycling those. Well, tell that to my brother-in-law who works in the landfill, who's got to look at mountains of these wind turbine blades every day when he goes to work. Members, let's not support this bill. Let's vote no tonight. Thank you.
The member from Faribault, Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I'm a little bit disappointed when you see the kind of the title and concept of this piece of legislation that talks about state competitiveness fund established. And I thought to myself, you know, the state of Minnesota has not been competitive in just about anything business related for many, many years. We're actually not even playing in the same sport. And so that's really frustrating to me because we could be so much better than what we are. And there's this term that keeps rolling around in my mind over and over when we discuss these things like renewable energy, which is not a bad thing. Renewable energy is not a bad thing. Taking care of our environment is not a bad thing. You know, my father told me something that his father told him, and his father told him a long time ago. He said, if you take care of the land, then the land takes care of you. And I am totally on board with that. And we've implemented a lot of environmentally friendly practices on our farm. We do minimal tillage. We do no-till drilling. We do a lot of these kind of things because economically it makes sense, and for the environment it makes sense. That's why we do these things. But the term that continually is running around in my mind is the idea of cognitive dissonance. Members, for those of you, because it's a little bit close to midnight here, I'll explain to you what the definition of that is. It's the state of having inconsistent thoughts, beliefs, or attitudes, especially as relating to behavioral decisions and attitude change. Members, if we are going to legitimately and honestly have conversations regarding this topic, the topic of renewable energy, the topic of green energy, and taking care of our environment, we need to take a holistic approach to it. We need to ensure that we're not just picking winners and losers in this environmental game. We need to look at it all. We can't say, oh, we don't like nuclear, so we're going to forget about it. We can't talk about, we're not even discussing the ideas of carbon sequestration. And the one thing that frustrates me more than just about anything that I can even imagine is how I consistently hear about people say, we can get to a neutral carbon emissions level. We're going to get neutral. We're going to get neutral. Well, guess what, members? In rural Minnesota, we can get to a net negative. If you are honestly serious about doing something, we can go negative in rural Minnesota. We just need to talk about it. This is what's so frustrating to me. No one is seriously looking for solutions. They say wind, they say solar, and that's all they say. There are so many answers to ensure that we have a legitimate and viable energy source many years into the future. You don't hear anyone talking about ethanol utilizing carbon sequestration tactics. That is an answer to the problem. It's not the entire answer because, members, guess what? Solar's not the entire answer. Wind is not the entire answer. It is a part of the answer, but it is not the entirety of the answer. And that is what is so frustrating. Members, if we are going to be serious, if we are going to be honest, we need to look at this from a holistic viewpoint. We need to include everything. We cannot just throw money at one or two options. We need to discuss the entirety of the issue. And that is what is so absolutely frustrating to me, members, because we can do really great things. We can do really great things. And I will admit that there are some really, really important reasons why unlocking federal funds is a good thing. But members, when we are ignoring entire aspects of this conversation, it is impossible in good conscience to vote for something such as this. If we were discussing the entirety of this conversation, the entirety of the solution, if we were honestly standing at a table and saying, look here, this could be a part of it as well, then this would be an easy yes vote. But members, we are not doing that. We are choosing to have one or two great things that we're going to throw our money at, and we are ignoring the majority of the answer to this question, the question of how to take care of our environment in a good way. The way to have energy, reliable, safe, and affordable energy. It's within our grasp. If we just have that conversation and come to the table honestly, I am so tired of having this over and over again. Hearing people discuss how we need more wind, we need more solar, and completely ignoring every other way of moving electrons. It is incredibly frustrating, and it is irresponsible. We got to get away from this cognitive dissonance, this idea that our thoughts can somehow completely remove themselves from reality. Let's have a real conversation, and when that real conversation happens, I'll be ready to stand at that table with you for that answer. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Acom yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Acom, roughly, what are your thoughts on, I think if I read the federal law correctly, they're spending $369 billion to put into most of these programs. What is the estimated leverage the state of Minnesota will have with its $115 million?
Representative Acom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I have heard some different numbers. The first numbers I heard were for every dollar invested, we would get between $7 and $8 in return. So that would be somewhere just under $1 billion. Now, in some of the more recent things that I've gotten back from the Department of Commerce, who has been actively engaged with the Department of Energy in Washington, D.C. on many of these, it's been a higher number, and closer to $1.8 billion is what the last estimate that I've been told.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Acom yield for another question?
She will. Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What would be the estimate from spend? We've heard a lot of the spend is potentially going to be focused on new transmission for utilities, both at the from investor-owned utilities, but also to the cooperatives and some others. What's the estimated return when it comes to the new transmission that's would be potentially needed for the flushing out of solar farms and all that? Is there a rough estimate that's in that particular area, or?
Representative Acom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I don't have an answer for that question. What I'll say is I have a packet here of dozens of different programs that are a part of the IIJA and IRA. Many of them haven't fully finished all their guidance. So I'm not exactly sure, but there's a huge variety of things that are available.
Thank you.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Representative Acom. One of the things that we're looking at whenever we have, I've heard a lot of folks calling and talking about this bill, and this is the Green New Deal in Minnesota. We're going to be funding a lot of different programs that support and subsidize green energy, and those things are real. If you look at what's going on, Minnesota is a drop in the bucket when it comes to our national production and consumption of electricity, but also kind of what are we doing in our competitiveness? And we found legislation when we carry it is important. There's always constituencies, there's always folks that support things, there's always folks that are against legislation. But at the end of the day, what are we doing when it compounds the fact to the other things that are reacting around us? And we saw with House File that passed earlier, which was, the carbon free by 2030 or whatever it was. You estimate what that's going to cost the average Minnesotan. They estimate that bill alone was $1,600 for your own bills and about $4,000 for a family. And you look at these billions of dollars that are going to be flowing around the nation. And, it's estimated that the $115 million that this bill spends and leverages probably potentially, estimates are $1.2 billion to $1.8 billion. And, as conservatives, as Republicans, our concern is, what is the real, when you flesh it all out, you spend a bunch of money, what is it really going to do? You know, when I've asked day after day in committee, asked this a lot more last year, but whenever we spend these dollars, how much, because ultimately this is about global, you know, how much will the temperature drop? And consistently, from a scientific basis, the answer is it's either negligible or within the margin of error. And so nationally, ladies and gentlemen, members, you know, not only just the state dollars for match, but the federal dollars that were dumped into these programs to subsidize electric vehicles, to subsidize solar, subsidize wind turbines across the country. You know, negligible, or it's going to be exceptionally small for any change that it might have in the environment. And for that cost, the cost of carbon, the cost on business, the cost of our competitive advantage, I believe that Minnesota is going to be an island. We're going to be stuck here in the middle of the Midwest, not necessarily competing against the Philippines, not competing against Southeast Asia, but competing against the Brookings, the Fargos, the Eau Claire, Wisconsins, the Des Moines, the Sioux Falls. And when you look at investment, when you look at how this bill compounds, when it comes to our reliability, does this bill make our energy supply more reliable? I would say no. Does this bill ultimately make, with the compounding of other bills, make Minnesotans' bills smaller? The answer is no. I mean, there's some caveats for folks between the other bills and some other things we'll be seeing, is that some folks will have their bills subsidized. We'll write checks to people if they didn't pay their bill or they can't afford their bill. And so we'll hear from the majority party that, hey, we made lower income folks' bills cheaper. But at what cost, right? You raise the cost for others to do business in Minnesota so that we can subsidize folks that can't afford the policies that sometimes they vote for. And do we make it safer? Do we make it safer? You know, as Republicans and conservatives, we like to make the argument that, you know, we really need to just be focusing on an all-above energy policy. Nuclear, coal, hydroelectric, big and small, industrial and small, wind and maybe even a little solar. It pains me a little bit to say that. But at what cost? Representative Mecklen talked that potentially in his district, that solar farms are going to consume potentially up to 20,000 acres. And in some estimates across the state of Minnesota, that potentially to be 100 to 150,000 acres at some point within the next 20 years may be consumed and taken off the roll when it comes to food production in Minnesota. And the argument is, well, we'll have bees, well, maybe let some goats chomp underneath them. But at the end of the day, when it comes to reliable food production, Minnesota is going to be at a major disadvantage when it comes to international markets. And that's not done in a vacuum, folks. When we pass this bill, we talk a lot about what is our responsibility from a global standpoint. What is our responsibility when it comes to our kids? And when I was a kid, the biggest fear that I had when I was going to school was killer bees and quicksand. And as you grow and as you mature, killer bees and quicksand really weren't as big a deal as we thought they would be. Watching Scooby-Doo or Gilligan's Island, every other episode had you dying in quicksand, and every other news article had you dying of being attacked by killer bees when you went outside to play with your friends. And Representative Davis talked really neatly about it. You know, what is the true cost in the future? You know, it's interesting, Representative Franzen asked the author of this bill whether we protected kids and slave labor, and it didn't. So this bill doesn't protect slaves or stop the use of slave labor in international markets, but at the cost on the sweat of the backs of kids that haven't even been born yet. to pay for it. So from a fiscal standpoint, that's reason enough alone. And I understand maybe we had folks in the co-op community and the utility saying, hey, this is free money. We just want our fair share. We want a chunk. Folks, just vote for this bill. We'll get that free money from Washington, D.C. and bring it right here. Well, folks, we have a responsibility, not just to say free money is free money, but to understand where does it come from? Whose back is going to have to stretch and work and lift to pay for it? And I would say that's reason enough alone to vote no, just from the fiscal impact. But I'll touch back to early in the conversation as being an island. Minnesota is an island when it comes to what we're doing. You know, we're already invoking lawsuits by other states, other economies, understanding that we are not only putting our own economy in danger, but theirs as well. That's a big deal. That's a real big deal. You know, I'm sure, you know, some of us will run in 2 years, some of us won't. Some of us will win, and some of us will lose. But I can guarantee that a future legislator, might be a freshman from some part of the state, and his first bill or her first bill will be going up to that table and nervously touching his papers and starting to talk about how do we pay for a lawsuit that we lost by states suing Minnesota for what we're doing. That's going to be someone's bill. And maybe Greg Davids will carry that one. I don't know. We'll see. But at the end of the day, what are we going to do? What is the island? So if the United States, what is the United States doing as a whole, as a people? We're spending $369 billion to reduce our carbon across the country, essentially funding the Green New Deal for the Biden administration. And Minnesota wants to play its part. On average, I think in 2022, Americans retired approximately 11.5 gigawatts of coal generation power. We've heard evil coal destroying the environment here in Minnesota. Kids are dying because of this. We're not worried about the ones getting cobalt, though. But what's the rest of the world doing? Are we an island as Minnesotans? Yes. Is America an island when it comes to doing this? Yes. Anyone have any idea how much China, which is in most circles, economic circles, what would folks call it, the growing economic magnate of the world? What are they doing? It's estimated they're adding over 86 gigawatts of coal generation power this year. So what's America doing? Getting rid of good base load energy to the tune of 11.5 gigawatts. And what's the rest of the world doing? The potential growing economic power? Almost adding 8 times as much. And I understand folks will say, well, this is going to create jobs. But in time and time again, part of this bill also has money setting aside for training. Why? Because we already have a shortage in the market. You go to any of your counties, you go to any of your cities, you go to any of your businesses, your welders, your manufacturers, we have a shortage of labor. And instead of understanding what the market can capacitate when it comes to labor and the distribution of labor and allowing the market to figure these things out, we're going to pile billions of dollars into programs to force these products into the market. You know, there's, I think, over almost $10 billion going to be spent subsidizing the fledgling electric car industry to help subsidize the purchase of electric vehicles for folks that on average make over $100,000 a year. On whose back does that weight fall? Is it yours? Is it mine? Is it grandma and grandpa? Or is it our kids? Well, if we don't have Social Security tax relief, it's going to be on grandpa, but it's also going to be on our kids. Competitiveness, job creation, out of control spending. At the end of the day, members, you need to ask yourself, does this bill do any of the three things that are most important when it comes to energy production? Does it, one, make it energy more affordable? No. Does this bill make our energy grid more reliable? No. And does it make our economy more dangerous because we're relying on inefficient, alternative sources of energy that are a non-base load? Yes, and that's not a good thing. Members, we all have election certificates. You each have an option tonight. And I would ask each and every one of you to take a little contemplative time to say, what is the best thing we could do tonight? It would be my encouragement that you vote no.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. Will the clerk please call the members who have not yet voted?
O'Neill.
O'Neill, no.
O'Neill, no. Pryor.
Pryor, aye.
Pryor, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 83 ayes and 47 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.